Live from News 7 KWWL, we've got you covered. This is KWWL News at 10.
On a special night in Iowa on this Monday. Good evening, everyone. I'm Ron Steele.
And I'm Abby Turpin. Thank you so much for joining us for our Caucus 2020 coverage.
And of course, thousands of Iowans from across the state proclaiming at caucuses tonight who they would like to see as the nominee in their particular party. Democrats caucus differently than Republicans, as you know. The Democrats are caucusing differently in the past, too, and we'll talk more about that with KWWL political analyst Chris Larimer here in just a few minutes.
Unlike 2016, results for the Democratic Party are very slow to come in tonight. At this point, what you're seeing on your screen, the first alignment numbers look like this. That is only 3% reporting. Bernie Sanders getting the most support, 26%.
Yeah, it's a really, in fact, 80% of the votes or the caucus results were in by this time 4 years ago. So we're not sure yet if it's the new smartphone caucus reporting app from the Iowa Democratic Party. Something's wrong with that, perhaps. The party says it's exercising quality control, and I've heard a lot of complaining at the network level about the slow results coming in here tonight.
And we do have Team 7 coverage all across our state.
Colin Dorsey and also Matt Breen in Des Moines for us live.
Good evening from Des Moines. Patience really is proving to be a virtue, especially for Democrats. Tonight, the last time you saw us half an hour ago, we had hoped to be able to bring you new numbers from Des Moines. Of course, we still have nothing on the board behind us. That board behind us reading results coming soon. That's the same message it's had for the last 3.5 hours, which is quite the oddity compared to previous years.
Yeah, Colin, this is the fourth caucus that I've covered from Des Moines, and never in 4 caucuses has it taken this long to get us numbers. 4 years ago, we already knew Ted Cruz had won the Republican caucus, and we knew that it was Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders that was going to win the Democratic caucus. But right now, we have no numbers to speak of, maybe a smattering of initial preferences. I think the delay may be for a couple of reasons. One, we know the Democratic Party shifted gears this year, and at the direction of the DNC, Iowa Democrats, under full disclosure, decided to release not just final preference and state delegate equivalent, they also would release first preference. And of course, they won't release any numbers from a caucus site until they have them all: the first preference, the final preference, and the state delegate equivalent. Also, a tweet from the Polk County Democratic Party chair earlier tonight said they had printed tens of thousands of new voter registration forms and distributed those to caucus sites. They ran out in some places, and of course it takes time to get forms to those caucus sites that ran out, and that delayed the process of getting people in the door and delayed the caucus process altogether.
And of course, we can back that up. Our political analyst at KWWL saying earlier that early entrance data shows that age group 17 to 29, along with 60 and older, are showing slightly better numbers than they had in 2008. So more people slows down the process.
It certainly does, but of course that may mean record turnout on the Democratic side. They set a record back in 2008 with 239,000 caucus goers. Republicans set a record 4 years ago. I don't think they'll eclipse that this year because it was a foregone conclusion that President Donald Trump was going to win the Republican caucus here in Iowa. With about 98% of the precincts reporting statewide, the president is going to handily win the Iowa caucuses in the Hawkeye state, followed closely by Joe Walsh and Bill Weld. Not closely, but followed by Joe Walsh and Bill Weld. They polling at about 1% at this point.
Each of them, probably between the two of them, only in the board behind us, I can only count about 800 votes split between the two.
So once again, we continue to wait for those initial results to come in here to the Media Reporting Center. It still says results coming soon. We certainly hope that's the case because we want to get those results to you, and we'll do so as they come in. For Colin Dorsey, I'm Matt Breen. We're live in Des Moines at the Media Filing Center. Now back to you.
Yeah, I can tell you guys are as frustrated as we are here tonight just waiting for these numbers. And, you know, it's really not about the raw numbers, though, that they're doing for the first time here tonight or the actual votes. It's about delegates. So we want to bring onto the set live here right now our KWWL political analyst, Dr. Chris Larimer of the University of Northern Iowa.
Yeah, and Chris, tell us more about this. Because the delegate equivalents might be very confusing to many people. So if you could explain that process.
Sure. So as you mentioned, there are going to be 3 numbers tonight. We're going to see the number of first alignment and then the final alignment number based on viability. And then that number is used to determine the state delegate equivalents. And those state delegate equivalents are used to determine the allocation of those district and state level delegates based on who's elected at the county convention next month. And really, this is just a proportional system. And so, again, the results we see tonight are used to determine how the state delegate, or that state delegate equivalent number, based on the 41 delegates, the pledged delegates that are going to be allocated to the state of Iowa for the National Convention. Those are broken down by congressional district level, and those are allocated proportionally based on the results from the precinct caucuses. So it is confusing in the sense it's not a straw poll vote that the Republicans do for their caucuses, but everything is supposed to be connected back down to the precinct level, and that's used to determine a proportion of the state delegates that each candidate is going to receive.
Yeah, it's complicated. There's no doubt about that, Chris. But, you know, a couple of key factors here tonight that we're talking about is turnout. And it looks like the turnout's going to be very good. But really, it's about philosophical or ideological viewpoints, and then also age, a big factor here tonight.
Age is a big factor, and if looking back actually 12 years ago to the 2008 Democratic caucuses, where there was record turnout, and a lot of insiders were thinking that turnout at the caucuses tonight was going to approach that level. The number of 17 to 20, or the proportion of 17 to 29-year-olds and those 65 and over are actually right now, at least according to the entrance polls, higher than they were in 2008, and that's really important, because right now we're seeing very clear differences between who the 17 to 29-year-olds support and who the 65 and over support. Right now, the 17 to 29-year-olds lean heavily toward Sanders. The 65 and over lean heavily toward Joe Biden, at least in some of these entrance polls. So age is going to be critical to how the results shake out.
Well, Chris, one thing we've also talked about is just how different the Republican caucuses are from the Democratic caucuses. Our reporter, Travis Breeze, on Friday did a report as we've been leading up to Caucus Night, and he termed it Democratic disarray, which I thought was pretty accurate. But from what we're seeing right now, because there's only one realignment now because of all the changes going on, it seems like maybe it was more of a quiet night overall.
Well, I think with the realignment, the way that was going to work this year, cutting down the time period for that realignment, the idea was that it would sort of expedite this process. But again, they're trying to report 3 sets of numbers this year, and as you mentioned, they're trying to use the new app this year to help with that process. But I think it's just one of those nights where it seems to be taking a long time to get all 3 sets of numbers into the Iowa Democratic Party in Des Moines. And again, as you mentioned, what we really want to focus on are those state delegate equivalents. The first 2 numbers are important. They give you a sense of candidate strength, but in terms of the final outcome and where those state delegates go from the state of Iowa when we get to the national convention, we really want to focus on those state delegate equivalents.
Yeah, Chris, it looks like 92% white turning out tonight. No big surprise there in the Iowa caucuses. 65% have attended a caucus before. 35% tonight, it looks like, in the entrance polls. It's their very first caucus. Everybody agrees, though, at least on the Democratic side, they're looking for someone who could beat the president.
Yeah, that's the big number coming out tonight. The entrance polls showing that about 62% of caucus goers are motivated by a desire to beat the president. Some would suggest that maybe it gives a little bit of an edge to a more moderate candidate like a Joe Biden or a Pete Buttigieg if you are interested really in electability. And then the other part of it is, as you mentioned, where the entrance poll showing that 35% of caucus goers made their decision in the last few days or today. That level of last-minute decision-making, you have to go back to the 2008 caucuses to see that higher proportion of likely caucus goers really making their decision in these last few days.
Chris, great job. We're going to come back to you in a few minutes. A lot to talk about here tonight, that's for sure. As we wait, like the whole nation is, for the numbers from the Iowa Democratic Party.
And while we do have a moment, let's go ahead and turn our attention right now to our forecast as we go ahead and take a live look outside on this Monday night over Waterloo.
Storm Track 7 Chief Meteorologist Mark Schnackenberg back in the forecast center right now. Are you waiting for numbers too, Mark? Or?
No waiting for numbers at all. I've got all the numbers. Not the numbers for the caucus, though.
No,
We've got
that's what I thought.
Temperature numbers out there, and they're pretty mild across the region. We're talking temperatures still at this hour in the 30s to about 40 degrees. See, we've got all the numbers. Cold numbers back to the north and west. Those are a temperature right now in Sheldon at 18, but then you factor in a bit of a breeze, which will continue throughout the overnight. Single digits and teens across our northwest. That colder air comes in our direction. So first thing tomorrow morning, it's going to be a bit colder than it has been the last couple of mornings. We're looking at temperatures in the single digits and teens and a lot of cloud cover around expected through tonight and into tomorrow. We'll take a look at your Storm Track 7 forecast in just a little bit.
Hey, Mark, back to you momentarily. Thanks very much. Let's turn our attention right now. Let's focus on some Blackhawk County numbers.
Yeah, the first alignment numbers are showing us with just 3% reporting still. Bernie Sanders, 24% support. Joe Biden, 22% support. And Pete Buttigieg with 18% support.
Yeah, and these are really kind of meaningless right now because we have such a low count coming in. The final alignments for Democrats in Blackhawk County on your screen. That remember, this is only 3%. We have really seen nothing from the Iowa Democratic Party yet as far as actual numbers coming in, and then we don't really know anything about the delegate equivalency at this point.
Absolutely. It's going to go to our next full screen if we can, showing the final alignment numbers. Again, we have nothing in at this time, so of course that also means we have nothing in right now as far as the delegate equivalents.
Let's go to the Republican side real quickly here. It's all President Trump, of course, and we talked about this a little bit earlier. Those Republican numbers, remember there were Republican caucuses as well tonight, but the president, of course, unopposed, so he had 98, 99% of those who did attend, 97 right there on your screen, did attend a Republican caucus tonight in Iowa. Overall, there were 62 Democratic caucus locations across Blackhawk County.
And the county's Democratic chair told us that registration numbers were 50% higher than in 2016.
With that in mind, let's check in right now live with KWW reporter Olivia Schmidt. Olivia spent the night in Waterloo at one of those caucuses. Tell us more.
Hey guys, yeah, I spent the evening at Irving Elementary in Waterloo. One precinct was in the cafeteria, one precinct was in the gymnasium. The entire process taking a little less than 2 hours. Now, the precinct caucus chair started the night reminding everyone to be kind, saying they were all there for the same reason, to beat President Trump in November. Nearly 100 neighbors gathered in the cafeteria, with Bernie Sanders showing a strong lead from the start. One volunteer tells me he's very pleased tonight. He says the process went smoothly.
There were a few disagreements, of course, but that's why we are in America. So we have that freedom to disagree and that freedom to be able to talk to each other and get through these hard issues to make sure that we get along and come to a consensus.
As far as numbers go in this precinct, there were 98 people who attended. At the end of the night, 56 chose Sanders, 19 chose Buttigieg, and 17 chose Biden. Warren and Klobuchar were not viable. I met one woman who supported Pete Buttigieg. She says these Iowa caucuses, they're fun, they're excited. She also told me a story about one couple. She says the wife supported Pete Buttigieg, but the husband, he didn't want to share with her his choice. I thought that was really interesting. At the end of the night, he finally ended up sitting with his wife and his daughter, but a family divided at the beginning of the night. Live in Waterloo, Olivia Schmidt, News 7 KWWL.
Olivia, thanks for the update tonight from one of the caucuses here in Blackhawk County. A new word in tonight from the Iowa Democratic Party. They say the glitch involves, this could be really generic here, they're saying the new counting system, which of course this means the three things that we've been talking about: first alignment, final alignment, and then the delegate equivalency. So we'll have to see what's happening because these numbers are just coming in way too slow. There's something big going on behind the scenes, and we'll try to get that to you as quickly as we can because we're not the only ones who have no numbers at this point. Meanwhile, Republican caucus goers, as we mentioned, also out in force tonight, showing that their voices matter as well.
Yeah, President Trump, of course, the incumbent, led Iowa very early on in the night.
KWW reporter Leslie Stone attended one of the caucuses for the GOP at Hoover Middle School tonight in Waterloo. The Republican caucus wrapped up in about 1 hour. So Leslie is talking about the main focus tonight for Blackhawk County Republicans.
Ron and Abby, Republicans say this year's caucus was a little different compared to 2016 with only 3 Republican candidates. That's including President Trump. Roughly 100 people gathered at Hoover Middle School tonight. Republican leaders saying the number of caucus goers this year were significantly less compared to 2016. But they say it's not necessarily about the votes or number of people this year, but more about standing behind President Trump.
We need to show our support for President Trump. He's done a lot of good things for the country, and so people need to come out and support him. If they become lackadaisical or apathetic, that's when we're in trouble.
One caucus goer who's been caucusing for several years tells me no matter the election, it's important for Republicans to stand together. Aside from the straw poll vote, caucus goers also discuss building the grassroots of the parties. Leaders say it's an important conversation, especially during an election year for the president. Leslie Stone, News 7 KWWL.
Leslie, thanks very much attending, I believe, your first caucus here tonight. So good, good experience there for you as well. Now let's take a look at some of the results. And again, really no results. First alignment out of Dubuque County and the Tri-States.
As you see, 3% still reporting, 41% there support for Bernie Sanders, 17% for Pete Buttigieg, 13% for Elizabeth Warren. But once again, as we have been mentioning, if you're just now tuning in, the Democratic Party has announced there is a delay in getting all of the results out tonight. Remember, there are 3 different sets of results because of the new counting system that they are using at this time. And the delegate equivalent numbers that we're going to talk a little bit more with Chris about that in just a moment, because once again we talked about it's a very confusing process, and again only 3% of the first numbers are out tonight, so we're keeping an eye on that.
It becomes a lot more confusing when you can't get the numbers out. That's for sure. So that's, I mean, this is not a good night for Iowa's, at least on the Democratic side, for Iowa's first in the nation precinct caucuses. There's no doubt about that. So KWW reporter Vinny Lowry has been covering Democrats in Dubuque for us tonight.
Yeah, he was at precinct 17 in Northeast Iowa Community College.
He's live right now in downtown Dubuque. Vinny.
110 people actually turned out to caucus for the Democrats at this specific precinct as people debated topics ranging from health care to electability and, of course, persuading others to join their alignment. Some of you might have also seen observers not participating, simply watching. Foreign exchange student Pete Ramon from Scotland, who came down from the University of Wisconsin, says Iowans should recognize how much power they have tonight.
It's so important to everyone across the world. Everyone is watching this. I mean, there's an old saying back home, which is when America sneezes, Britain catches a cold. Usually that refers to the economy. When there's an economic crisis here, everyone else is affected as well.
Ramon currently studies politics, and he says if he had the choice of caucusing, he would caucus for Bernie. He also says it's been a dream growing up seeing the Iowa caucus in the United Kingdom on TV, but now he got to see it happen in action. After the second alignment, the viable groups were Warren, Buttigieg, Sanders, as well as Klobuchar. Biden, however, was deemed not viable at precinct 17. And also Tom Steyer at this specific precinct had no representatives for his campaign. Live in Dubuque, Vinny Lowry, News 7 KWWL.
Okay, Vinny, some of those very early results coming in out of Dubuque County. We appreciate your reporting tonight there. Of course, Iowa taking the world's center stage on the political scene. Eyes turning toward the first in the nation caucuses tonight, but not faring so well as the numbers are just not coming in from the Iowa Democratic Party yet.
Absolutely. For such a long time, candidates have been racing across our state's 99 counties for many months, all leading up to tonight. But of course, as we've mentioned, there is a delay right now. So let's turn now, though, to a live report from Taylor Vessel. He's standing by in Des Moines. Taylor, what have you heard right now?
Ron and Abby, I really want to talk about that delay for a second because it's something that all the journalists here in the Media Filing Center in Des Moines are paying attention to. For 3.5 hours almost now, we've been waiting for the Democrats to come back with some sort of numbers. What I've got here for you is a quote from the Register right now. Mandy McClure, the communications director for the Iowa Democratic Party, acknowledges the delays that we've been talking about from the app and also from that new counting system with 3 sets of data coming out tonight. What they say is what we know right now is that around 25% of precincts have reported, and early data indicates turnout is on pace for 2016. Now, of course, for the Democrats, the big year was 2008 with more than 200,000 Democrats turning out to caucus that year. Not sure if that's how it will be this year or not. We have heard that young voter turnout seems to be up so far, especially for Bernie Sanders supporters. Again, we're waiting desperately for some results to come in right now. A lot of what we're seeing is just what we're noticing online and just what's coming in anecdotally through Twitter. So we will continue to stand by here and watch for results and also more answers on what is taking so long and how those delays are playing out. Reporting live in Des Moines, Taylor Vessel, News 7 KWWL.
Yeah, Taylor, thanks a lot. In fact, we're even hearing that some of the phone lines to the Iowa Democratic Party headquarters went down tonight, so obviously compounding the situation, which is also pretty dire at this point, yeah.
Quite a night. We're all in the same boat. We do want to remind everyone that as the results eventually do come in, of course, you can find everything on our website, kwwl.com. We now want to turn back to our political analyst, Dr. Chris Larimer from the University of Northern Iowa. And Chris, since we do have some time, let's talk a little bit about the history of caucuses. For those who don't know, as I've been researching leading up to this night, very interesting. And of course, I think a lot of people are aware that really the big change came in 1976 with Jimmy Carter.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, the caucuses were really born out of the, I guess you could call it the disaster of the Democratic National Convention in 1968. And there were a series of reforms put into place so that who the nominee would be for the Democratic Party would be more connected to what happened at the precinct level in caucuses as well as to primaries. And so Iowa, as a result of that, very cleverly at the time, decided to move up their caucuses in 1972 to being first. And they were a little unsure as to, if that would mean anything, if candidates would pay any attention to Iowa. Well, in 1972, George McGovern, senator from South Dakota, did decide to campaign in Iowa for a short period of time. He ended up finishing third, but what was really important for the Iowa caucuses is that he exceeded expectations. He came within about 13 percentage points of Edmund Muskie, who was the front runner at the time, someone who had been endorsed by Harold Hughes. And he exceeded expectations. And again, what was really important for the caucuses is that he went on to be the Democratic nominee. And then, as you said, fast forward to 1976, you have Jimmy Carter, who again comes to Iowa, spends a significant amount of time in Iowa, finishes second to uncommitted in the 76 caucuses, but goes on to be the nominee and then goes on to the White House. And so those two results, the fact that you had candidates come to Iowa, spend time in Iowa when other candidates had not in the past, and then those two candidates were successful after Iowa, really sort of propelled Iowa to the front-runner status that we had in terms of national attention. And you can even go forward to 1980, where George H.W. Bush adopted that same strategy, the Carter strategy of kind of retail politics, and would go on to win Iowa, be the vice president, or be the on the vice presidential ticket with Ronald Reagan. And so, if those three results had not panned out the way that they had, who knows where we'd be in terms of the Iowa caucuses being first. But because of that, Iowa has really been first and received a lot of national attention.
Chris, a lot of people think Jimmy Carter won the Iowa caucuses in 1976, but he did not. In fact, he finished a distant second to uncommitted. But this year, though, are there 3, 4, or 5 tickets out of Iowa, do you think?
Well, that's a really good question. You're right. Typically, we talk about three tickets out of Iowa, with the exception of John McCain in 2008, who finished fourth, but then went on to be the Republican nominee in 2008. Or you can even go back to 1992, the Democratic caucuses, where Bill Clinton finished fourth. But that's a little bit of an outlier because you had someone from Iowa running and the candidates really didn't compete here. I still would think it's probably 3, 4 tickets out of Iowa. Once we get the results, it'll be interesting to see. But there's still a lot of speculation about Michael Bloomberg and what his candidacy means for the race for the Democratic nomination, in terms of he's really focusing his money and his time in these bigger states for Super Tuesday. So, I still think it's probably 3 or 4, but I think the order of how the candidates finish tonight is going to be really, really important, because there are different candidates leading in the states after Iowa. If you look at New Hampshire, South Carolina, and then Nevada.
And one of those is Amy Klobuchar. In fact, she's speaking right now. Chris, let's listen in live. Amy Klobuchar.
3 words. Unite and lead. That is how I have passed over 100 bills as the lead Democrat in the United States Senate, in the middle of that gridlock. And that is how I have won elections in the reddest of red congressional districts, in the bluest of blue congressional districts. The president, though, he might as well have a sign on his desk that says, "The buck stops anywhere but here." Look at what he has done. He blames everyone for our problems. He blames everyone, people that shouldn't be blamed. Who does he blame? He blames immigrants, right? He blames Barack Obama. He blames the Fed chair that he nominated, the energy secretary that he appointed, the generals that he commands, and yes, the King of Denmark. He even recently blamed Justin Trudeau for cutting him out of the Canadian version of Home Alone 2. Who does that? Who does that? So let me tell you what I will do. When I am behind that desk, I will take responsibility instead of passing it on. I will reach across the aisle and work with Americans in good faith. Instead of picking fights, I'll bring this country together instead of pushing it apart. Some of you may know that old story about Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And it was a story about how after he died, they put his body on a train and it worked its way to Washington, D.C. And there's a story of a reporter who came upon a man who was crying by the side of those tracks. And the man had his hat on his chest and he was sobbing. And the reporter looked at him and said, "Sir, do you know President Roosevelt? Did you know him?" And the man says, "No, I didn't know President Roosevelt, but he knew me. He knew me." And what we are missing so much right now in our country is that sense of empathy. We are missing that caring. And I promise you this, I will bring back that sacred trust between the American people and the President of the United States.
So there's Amy Klobuchar, and in a lot of people's view, and mine particularly too, I think that's a very smart idea of her to go now. It almost gives the impression that she is the winner tonight when actually no results are yet in, but I think a very smart move on the part of the Amy Klobuchar campaign tonight. Have her go first, gives the appearance nationwide, because I'm sure some of the networks picked up her speech right there too. Kind of gives the impression that maybe she's out in the lead or perhaps even won, but in fact we don't really have any numbers yet.
Let's go and get those numbers up there right now. Amy Klobuchar, again, 4% now reporting first alignment out of Johnson County alone. She has 12%, and that is in 4th place right now. Again, this is only 4% reporting of this first alignment. Once again, numbers delayed because of the new counting system. That's according to the Democratic Party.
Yeah, look at that there. Joe Biden with only 8% down in Johnson County, where he probably was not expected to do well anyway. Bernie Sanders is obviously going to be the big choice in Johnson County because a lot of his supporters, the Sanders supporters, still feel they got cheated in 2016. They feel the DNC aligned everything to go in favor of Hillary Clinton, and they turned out in force tonight, particularly in the college communities.
Right now, we want to turn back to our live coverage from our Team 7. Standing by in Johnson County right now is Travis Breeze. Travis, what's the very latest?
Ron and Abby, the Democrats here at Iowa City Precinct 6 at Mercer Park Gym finished up about 30 minutes ago, and it was actually Elizabeth Warren who came out on top here. She had the first lead initially and then maintained that and had 220 caucus goers by the end of the selection process here. Candidates Joe Biden and Pete Buttigieg were not viable after the first counts. The climax of the realignment period here, at least, came when nearly all of Buttigieg's supporters moved over to Senator Amy Klobuchar's camp. One of the two initially undecided voters tagged along with.
I came with them. I really like Pete Buttigieg's positive message, and so that was important to me, but he wasn't viable, and so it was time to make a decision.
Senator Klobuchar missed viability by just 7 initially, but became viable after the realignment, picking up 3 delegates here at Iowa City Precinct 6. Now, Ron, like you were talking about, some of the failures that Joe Biden has had, we did witness that a little bit here. As I said, he was not viable off the front. His precinct captain told me that some of the diversity here in Iowa City may have been a little bit hard to plan for. Reporting live in Iowa City, Travis Breeze, News 7, KWWL.
Yeah, there again, Travis, thanks for the report. Age plays a big factor there on the college campuses. They're looking for that more progressive candidate, maybe someone not quite as radical in the eyes of, admittedly, he calls himself a socialist Democrat, Bernie Sanders, but Sanders doing well, and the Senator Warren doing well. So Biden's age worked against him tonight in Johnson County. Yeah.
Let's go and take a quick break here at 10 o'clock. We are staying on live with you until we have the results right here on KWWL. You're getting a live look at Des Moines. Again, we are counting down the minutes until we get those results. We hope to have them into our newsroom at any minute, so please stay with us. We'll be right back.
This is KWWL News at 10 with Ron Steele, Abby Turpin, Storm Track 7 Chief Meteorologist Mark Schnackenberg, and Sports with Rick Coleman. We've got you covered.